Welcome back to Upfront with me, Bex. Today I've got a very special guest on. I've got my partner Jack on, and we're going to be talking all things men's mental health. Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Can't wait. I'm so excited for this.
Well, don't sound too excited.
Dreading it, actually.
Right, we've got a lot to get through and a lot of questions. So let's jump straight in with a bit of background. How long you've been bodybuilding for?
How long you got?
You take the reins.
Well, when you say bodybuilding, do you mean seriously or just in general?
So give us a background. You've always been involved in sports, so go from there.
Yeah, I've always been a very sporty child, shall we say, I played football from when 6, 7, 8, all the way through to like secondary school. And then I took up everything else that I could get my hand into. Cricket, tennis, rugby, volleyball, badminton, anything that was like hand-eye coordinated, I'd get involved in.
Was that through enjoyment? You just loved sports, or did you feel you had to do that for a certain reason?
I just love sports.
Yeah.
I liked football, cricket and all that sort of stuff. The only reason I really played rugby is because we'd only play tournaments and they'd be during school time. So
Yeah,
you'd leave
that's
school at like 12 o'clock and I'd be like, great. But then we wouldn't get home till 5, but that doesn't really matter. When you're at school, you're just like, I just want to get out at lunchtime.
So when did you start training? When did you start the gym?
As soon as you can. So back then, I think you can still now, is you can join a gym at 16.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I was 16, I joined Fitness First, which was a stone's throw from my house. Back when Fitness First was a thing. But I only used to go because to use the facilities. So like sauna, steam room, all the stuff that came with it. And then the gym was just sort of part of it. I wouldn't take it serious by any means.
When did you have like a moment or an age particular where you thought like, maybe you learned about what bodybuilding was and you thought like, I want to be big. I want to be a big bloke.
Definitely not. So 16, 17, 18, it was just going to the gym with the boys and the thing that people hate nowadays where you just see nippers chatting on benches and on their phones and stuff. That was me at 16.
I think that's a really good environment for young men.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think it's as much as I can sit here now and go, oh, you shouldn't be going to the gym for a social, you should be going there for purpose. But I think you have to go through that process to get to where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do the social thing where you just go for a catch-up with the boys or whatever. But back then it was just how much you can bench. And I blew my...
Ego lifting.
Yeah, all day long. It was like, if my mate could put this, well, I was only 16, so we'd always go on the Smith machine and one bloke would put like 20 on the side. And that was massive back then.
Were you always the strongest one?
No. But I'd always try and do, someone would get like 8 reps on that Smith machine and I could get like 7, but I'd blow my shoulder out from doing it, which is why I hate flat bench so much, because I've probably got fear from that.
Yeah.
But that was just how it was. So
pretty much, I would say that's quite a young age to start the gym, definitely. So you've been in a gym environment from a teenager. And have you ever had a big period of time off from gym, or have you consistently trained from that age?
I've been in and out of gym from 16 is what I'd say. I went from Fitness First, then I'm trying to remember my timeline now. I remember I went on a boys' holiday to Cavos.
Yeah, so you've had little periods of time relaxed.
Yeah, but I've always been in and out. But when I moved to like my first bodybuilding gym, if you want to call it that, was I'd just come back from a boys' holiday at Cavos, and then we started up with a bodybuilder, like PT sort of thing for a month, me and my mate. And he basically walked us through like a bodybuilding split.
And what age was that?
20.
Early 20s.
1,
yeah.
22. And basically took us through the basic, which is like a push-pull legs, basically. Taught us a little bit about food and stuff like that, but not really. But it was mainly getting in the environment of like big bodybuilders sort of thing.
And did you look at them and think like, I want to be like that, I want a bit of this?
There was a couple of guys there that I would definitely like to look like. But then no one was there that sort of replicated my frame. It was always like short, stocky bodybuilders who were massive. There was no one who was like 6'5".
So if
big.
anybody's watching this and they don't know who you are, I've never seen you before, Jack is 6 foot.
5.
6'5". You're a big man.
And at that time, I was probably 15 stone wet,
Yeah.
which is not a lot.
Okay.
I don't know what that is in pounds or kilos or whatever.
What age would you say you were when you thought, oh, I'm actually a decent size now, and you felt like I've really put some muscle on? You still don't feel like that now?
No, but probably last year, maybe.
Wow, okay.
Well, maybe even this year, because that's when I've properly got in stage condition to see how big I am with no body fat.
Okay. So you're...
Never thought I was big.
How old are you now?
31.
So 31, my toy boy.
Lucky girl.
Yeah. So you've 10 years been basically training for, but taking it seriously, you'd probably say the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'd say ever since I've had a coach, well, when I done my first prep, that was just sort of a winged prep and thrown in the deep end going, oh, let's just get on stage, blah, blah, blah. I took that prep very seriously, but then when I reversed out of it, or whatever word you want to use, I just went back to my normal routine of I'd always eat the same foods at work, which is chicken and rice to keep it clean. But then after work, I'd always have whatever dinner I wanted or whatever. I had no structure food-wise until I got a coach, which was at the age of, 28? So I'd say for probably, I've only taken bodybuilding very seriously for probably the last 3 years.
You know, you said about when you were first in the bodybuilding gym and there was men there that you seen for the first time, you think like, wow, I'd like to kind of look like that. Do you still know who they are now?
Yeah.
On social media and stuff?
And the only one, the one notable bodybuilder there is like, he's like mid-40s now and doesn't really use Insta.
So in comparison to what you look like then and what you look like now against them, how much closer are you to looking like them now?
I'll probably say I'm the same.
Isn't that funny? Like, that's not really been that much time.
But in my head, I would probably still say they're bigger than me because I still look at myself as if I'm the 21-year-old boy walking into a bodybuilding gym for the first time.
I wonder if those bodybuilders feel like that about themselves.
I
think of how many boys start in the gym now that are 16, 17, look at you and just think, like, I'm, you know, when we go and train somewhere, sometimes if we go to a different gym, the amount of times I come over to you and say, I've just heard those two blokes there saying such and such about you. Like, you don't realise, but when you walk into a space, like, it takes some people's breath away when they see how do you say that? Some people's breath away when they see your legs in person. They're like, like, the size of you is shocking in real life, and it doesn't translate well in pictures at all. I think when people see you for the first time in real life from online, it's just like, Jesus Christ, that's a big man with your height and your frame and your...
But I never look at it that way. Like, it's the same...
Do you think that's a bit of a dangerous thing? Do you think that you'll always be chasing something that, not that you won't get, but...
I think that's a good thing.
You think that's a good thing?
Because you'll never get to where... If you're in the right mindset of what you actually want to achieve, you'll never realistically get there.
Proud but never satisfied.
Yeah. Content but never always want more. I would think that would go for everyone, in no matter what discipline you choose, whether it's fitness, business, whatever. There's always someone doing better than you. And even if you're number one, you always want more.
Do you find there's particular people that you look up to? Because just going back to what I was saying about how people view you, how young boys view you and stuff, do you have people that you look up to in your life and kind of not want to be like that, but they inspire you?
Yeah, but I would say I probably know only a couple of them personally. I'd say I look up to people that I don't know more than people I do know, which is probably a bad thing.
Who are the ones you do know?
CBC.
Who's that?
My coach, Christian.
Okay.
Christian Chapman.
Yeah. Coached by Christian, Instagram.
People like CBC, you, my parents are probably the people that I know,
Mm-hmm.
and then the people I don't know, or people I've met but I don't know personally very well.
Thanks for saying you look up to me.
Well, you're very successful in business.
Can we talk about what that is on your face? What this means?
November, isn't it?
So why do you have this tash? Jack doesn't normally look like this.
For the last, I think 4 years I've done it, and I've always done something different. It's for November, which is to raise awareness for men's mental health and everything that comes with it.
Men's health in general.
Yeah, and stuff like testicular cancer and stuff like that. But I always try and do something different.
What made you do it for the first year? You said you've done it 4 years in a row.
I don't know. I think I just got bored of the beard,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew how quick I could grow it. So, you know, when some boys are like, oh, I'm not doing it because it took me a year to grow this.
Mm-hmm.
I got this cut
There you go.
about 5 days ago,
Yeah.
and this is how much it's grown through already. So I'll have a full beard back in about a month.
So much to my dismay, when you come home with your beard gone, you do it to raise money, raise awareness, which is obviously very important, and we want to definitely touch on that on today's podcast.
And also because I think it's a good laugh.
Yeah.
When I do the different ones. So the first time I did it, I just obviously had the tash that I got now. Last year, Toby reminded me of this. I did like the Wolverine, where I kept
I remember
a full beard into the handles. Oh, sorry. And then the one before that, I had the full handlebars with nothing on the side.
That was my worst.
That was
was our first year together, and I'd never seen your chin before.
A lot of people haven't.
I remember I came to your flat and you'd gone and had your beard, your November done, and you turned around and looked at me and I thought, who's that?
Yeah.
Who's this bloke?
When I used to play American football, they called me the Crimson Chin for that reason.
You've got a big chin.
Unfortunately. Why do you think I got a beard?
Yeah, it's true.
Got to hide it.
You're handsome with and without in my eyes.
Thank you so much, my love.
So.
Got to say that in public, and
No, I say it to your face. So, Fran's question. This is diving in at the deep end. Does Jack think events in his life has changed the way he approaches or thinks about things?
All day long.
We actually had a quite good talk about this the other night. We stayed up till like 1 a.m, just chatting, and we were talking about, our first, when someone first broke our heart, things like that. And you think they're really definitive moments, don't you, in shaping you as a person?
I think this happened when I was, as I said to you, I think I was 16, 17. I was with this girl, really liked her, blah, blah, blah. And then she split up with me. And it just really threw me off to the point where I was like, I'll never feel like this again in regards to exposing myself.
That is such a big thing to think at that age, because I went through so much. I never had a moment where I've still probably only in the last, since I've known you, I have thought like that. I'd never would, things have happened to me so many times, but I'd never stop and think, right, remember this, remember how you feel, and change the way maybe you approach something, or this is how this has affected you. I didn't think like that until I knew you, and I even know those thought processes were kind of a thing. So for you, that's quite a mature way to think, I think, at that age.
I think it was just one of them things where I exposed myself so much because I wanted to be with her, and then she just put me in the ground. I was like, I'll never feel like this again. So then I would never sort of expose my feelings-wise to let that happen again, which is good or bad, whatever way you look at it.
So you learnt to put a wall up quite early?
Yeah, or I had a way of wording it, which has got some naughty words in it.
Do you know what? I don't think you've sworn once yet.
No, I haven't.
I'm really proud of you. Proud of you.
No, it was, and then that was sort of like my motto, if you want to call it that, for how I would approach most things. Well, I mean, I'll just say it, and if you want to blow it out, you can. It was be or get treated like one. So I always took the offensive. So I would be the bad person or whatever way you wanted to paint me. So then I wouldn't get treated like one.
Interesting.
And then,
do you still live by that today?
I'd say no.
Why?
Because just yes and no, I would say. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends who I'm dealing with.
Okay.
But then from that made me think about everything future-wise. So that made me, I don't know if I had it that early on, but my thought process has always been very much, if I make this decision, whatever it may be, I need to think 5 steps ahead.
This is another thing that I don't know if I learnt it from you, but I had never thought that way before.
I
make decisions and I do not think about
yeah,
the day after.
Before I do anything, I think about it for a very long time. And before I even do that decision, I think about the domino effect of what will happen if I do that decision. And if, I know, whatever it may be, there's always a good way it can go, the domino effect from that decision, or there's a bad way. And I want to make sure I'm prepared for all of them. So then if it does in fact happen, I'm not shocked by it. So
I just think that way of thinking is really emotionally mature, and I think you developed that quite early on.
It's always, I think it's because of what happened that early on. I never wanted to be that surprised by anyone's decision ever again. So then I always put myself in the position of going, if I do this, this person could react this way for whatever reason. And if I've already processed it in my head, then if that happens, it doesn't affect me emotionally or whatever because I've already lived it. So it's just happening, whatever I thought was going to happen.
Did your mum and dad talk about emotions a lot growing up?
Yes and no, maybe. I don't know. I'd say no.
You'd say no.
I'd say no.
And
I can't really remember that well.
Okay.
For that time.
Obviously, you've got 2 sisters as well.
Mm-hmm.
Were they because you're quite close, were they, did they encourage you to so if you did have your girl troubles, for example, when that happened with that girl, did you shut off or did you talk to your family about it?
I shut off about it.
Okay.
I've always been able, stuff like that, I've always been able to speak to Helen, my younger sister. I think mainly because we just get on so well. That doesn't mean I wouldn't speak to my other one about it. I think it's because my older sister left home at 18, which would have made me 6. Or around then she left. So I didn't grow up in the home.
Yeah, I think when there's a little bit of distance there, you feel like you can talk to people more text.
But because I grew up with Helen, she was still at home when I was going through my teenage years. I probably related to her a lot more and felt like I could confide in her a lot more.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then when she moved out, then it became my mum's job if I wanted to speak about it. But my mum always used to make me laugh because I would always talk to her about stuff. And I know this has been ingrained in me from her. She would always say she would say what I needed to hear or I didn't want to hear. And then she'd always take the other side. But she didn't mean to do it. She just would see it from the other person's point of view.
You do that?
Yeah, I know, which is where I get it from. And I remember a couple of moments where I would speak to my mum about something that was sensitive or whatever. And she would just say it from the other person's point of view. And I'm like, you're supposed to be on my fucking side. You're my mum. We don't care about this person. Be on my side for once. And she's just like, that's just how it is. And I know I do that. And I definitely got it from her. Who
were you closest to growing up? So who would you go to for advice and in your family?
Out of all of them? It would depend what it was.
Okay.
I think I would...
But you'd say you always had someone to talk to if you needed to?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think where I worked with my dad very early on and we had that working relationship, we didn't really have those conversations because I felt like it was a very working relationship as much as...
I think sometimes, sorry to interrupt you, but with a dad as well, when the mum and dad are together and you're living in the same house, if you're able to go to your mum and talk about certain things, your mum feeds that back to your dad, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, of course.
And then your dad knows what's going on, but you don't really need to come, know. Did you feel you could talk to your dad though if you had to?
If I had to, but I always felt, this is the other thing about the way I think about things as well, is that if I speak to someone about something, I know both outcomes of what I'm talking about. It's just whether I do it or not. So whatever the question may be, back when I was like, I don't know, mid-20s, if I still want to be with this girl that I was with or whatever, and if I speak to my parents about it, I know both answers. It's either I stay or I don't, and I know pros and cons of both. And that's all they're going to say to me. But I'm not looking for them to convince me. I'm just talking when I know what I got to do. I've just got to suck up and do it.
But I think it's really lovely that you had that dynamic and you have people to talk to, because a lot of people don't. I think something I struggled with, I've talked to you about it before, like, and I still struggle with it now if I'm going through. You really encourage me to talk a lot because I will just shut down with things. And I think that's because growing up I didn't have that. And for anyone watching this, a good trick if you're a parent is, and I encourage my children to do it because I did it as a child, I'll write down how I'm feeling. And I used to, like, even if it didn't make sense, I remember doing it from really young, I would just write all my feelings down, all my if it was just a problem, and I just like slip it under my mum's door and then she would help me from there. But I still struggle now, even with you. You're just like, what is it? What? And I'm just like, it's like the words won't come out. And I don't know why that is, but a really good way to try and communicate is to write things down. Kind of do that with you with text as well. Like if it, but I
think some people just communicate better without the confrontation of face to face. It might just make them feel safer.
Yeah.
Whereas some people just
my brain's ticking now. I'm like, why do you not like confrontation? What's your inner child saying? Something's not right there. But anyway, not bad.
I've never liked confrontation, but I'm always both sides of the fence of it. I'll let things run as long as they need to. But then inside I'm thinking this is going to get to the point where I'm going to have to say something about it. And then it's always 0 to 100 from like a confrontation point of view of me, because I've let it run so long. Then once it gets to that point where something needs to be said, then it's just sort of game over. It doesn't gradually get up. It just gets there straight away.
Have you ever had a point where you think with your mental health, where you have thought, I'm really struggling or something doesn't feel right in my head? Or
I think I'm one of the fortunate ones that haven't.
Yeah. But I wonder if that's because you've always had good communication, someone to talk to. You've always had one or two really close friends, haven't you? Male friends, which is you're so lucky to have. And I think circumstantially you've always had that. And I think you're such a headstrong person. And as I said earlier, the way that you thought about things from so early on probably really helped. And the environments you've always been in, like training from a young age, I think a lot of like youth or young men put them, they're living these lifestyles of like drinking a lot. Don't get me wrong, you did your drink, you did your drugs, you did all of that.
I've lived that part of my life and that's got me to where I am now. And that's why I feel comfortable talking about it, because especially in the game that we're in from a coaching point of view, it's so much easier to relate to someone who's done it. So when I talk about as soon as I could, I was drinking before I could drink because you could drink at home, but from like 18 all the way to 27, I was out every other weekend doing everything and anything, and I've done it. And now I'm in a position where I couldn't think of anything worse than going out on a Saturday, spending, it's even more expensive now than what it used to be, spunking 150 quid on drink and then another 100 quid on drugs, waking up the next day feeling like an absolute you lose your Sunday and then you've got to go back to work Monday and do it all again. I couldn't think of anything worse. The night part, it was the fear of losing my next day that really got to me, because you'd never get it back.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anyone says, no matter how good you are at drinking or whatever, you do that stuff, you lose your next day. You can't function.
I want to talk to you about the effect of the use of steroids on your mental health, or potentially the effects. How old were you when you started using steroids?
23.
That's young.
It's young to talk about it from what we know now, but back then it's the classic story where you're in a gym with a bodybuilding gym and the geezer next to you goes, oh, you should take this. And
Did you feel pressured?
No. It was a mutual decision by me and my mate that I used to train with at that time. He was like, should we do it? And I was like, it was one of them decisions. I was just like, why not?
And did you tell anybody in your family you were going to do them?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because they'd crucify me. It's all, the thing with stuff like that, and that's what I speak to a lot of people about, is people fear what they don't know. And if you don't know about it, you instantly shut down about it. So if I spoke to someone and said, I'm going to start doing steroids, and they know nothing about it, all they've read in the media is that they saw some guy at 30 who was on steroids and he's died for whatever reason, but they never talk about anything else that was going on in that bloke's lifestyle. Was he doing loads of drugs? Was he drinking at the weekend? Did he have a style? Was he overweight? Blah, 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 blah. 9 times out of 10, it's not the steroids. They don't help, but they're not the cause of death.
You're 31-year-old bodybuilding male right now. If you could go back in time and see your 23-year-old self at the gym and have that conversation about taking steroids, would you still start them then?
Absolutely not.
So that's interesting that you say, I wouldn't tell my family because they would crucify me because it'd be the wrong thing to do. But you actually agree with that now, that it would have been the wrong thing to do at that time?
No, I mean, it would have been the wrong thing to tell them.
Oh, would you have still taken steroids at 23?
Knowing what I know now, I'd say no. But then knowing where it's got me.
I don't sit and say this in a smug way, like,
no, not at all.
You did the wrong thing.
No.
But I think it's so important for, if there's any boys or parents with teenage boys watching this who, have those conversations, because...
I'm having conversations now with people who still live at home with their mum. And
do you mean clients of yours?
Yeah. And they're saying stuff like, I'm thinking about it, but I'm getting queries from my mum saying, don't you ever do this? Don't you ever do that? But they don't know what even remotely goes on about it. They're just going from what they've heard from their mate down the street. They don't know enough about it to make an educated decision, which is fine. Because, I mean, if it's your son, you want your son to do the most healthy things in the world as possible. But
how would you feel if you had a son and he came to you at 18, 19, 20, 21, young age, and he'd been training with you and he's like, Dad, I want to jump on. How are you handling that?
There needs to be a lot more context to that. Like if he's been training for 4 or 5 years and doing everything to make the most out of his physique naturally, then that conversation can happen. But if this person's been in the gym for 3 months, doesn't eat the right food, don't sleep, doesn't prioritise anything, and just wants to jump on, they can poke it.
Do you feel if you did have a son, would you feel, and he was doing, all his variables were bang on and he wanted to start gear, would you feel like, what's the word I'm looking for? Would you feel protective over what he was putting in his body, or would you be like, would you be happy to oversee it and
I'd much
help
prefer to have a hand in it than not have a hand in it.
Do you feel like it's one of those things, like, if you're going to do it anyway, I want to know about it and I want to make sure you're doing it absolutely? Because
I think the more you push away, the more you make whoever it is, they'll want to do it anyway. So I think if you're in a household going, don't you ever touch drugs, don't you ever touch drink, blah, 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 they're going to do it anyway because that's just part of growing up, I think. So you may as well be open about it and actually talk about your experiences.
So obviously, looking at you, it's going to have become clear at some point to your parents that you were doing steroids. How did that happen?
Well, that didn't happen.
They did not guess that you were doing it by the size of you and the rate you were progressing.
Well, when they got found, that was when I was doing my first prep, so I wasn't what I am now.
Oh, okay.
So I had...
So they found steroids.
It was not a terrible way, but it's one of them things where I'm like, thinking back, I've only got myself to blame, and I was just asking for it. I used to keep it in one of my bags, and I was still living at home at this point. And I got home, took my food out of my bag, and at the time, it was in like a little golf ball box.
When you say it, what was it?
Steroids.
In what sense?
So like the vials. The vials.
Needles as well?
No. I used to keep them separate. So like a little golf ball box, you know, like the little rectangle. And my dad used to play golf. So I've got my Tupperware out my bag because I've just come back from work. And he's seen this golf ball box in my bag. And then I just left it alone. Like I've just put my bag on the side and left it thinking, like, that's that. Lo and behold, he thought, why has he got golf balls for? And then he's obviously looked in my bag and saw it. And then we had a conversation about it.
How did that go?
Fine, actually. He walked up to me and went, I've just looked in your bag. And I've just gone, right. He's gone,
Did you know straight away?
Yeah, all day long. Because that was the only thing in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you know what I've seen? I've gone, yeah.
And how old were you?
27.
Okay. So that's obviously an age, you're a fully grown man, you can do what you want, but he needs to say something.
Yeah. But he's saying it from a protective father point of view. But it's the same thing. Because he doesn't know a lot about it, you instantly think the worst, or you've just heard things about whatever on TV or whatever. And he was just like, look, I know you know what you're doing in regards to, because I just research everything. There's no reason why you can't learn about anything in this day and age. So you can make yourself as prepared as possible if you're going to do anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's all he said. He was just like, look, I know you know what you're doing. I'm not happy about it, but I also know that you know what you're doing. So as long as you can guarantee me that you're not going to be a then it's fine.
So there was a lot of trust there, and that made it okay.
Yeah, all day long. And then
you went and told your mum?
He made me tell my mum.
Oh, good for him. I like that.
We was at work, same thing. So
that's funny that he's like, I'm not the one doing it. You tell your mum.
Because we worked together and all that sort of stuff. We spoke about it quite a bit, and he was just like, this happened on a Friday, I think, and then we left over the weekend, and he was like, you got to tell your mum, because I can't let it run anymore, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did. And it's funny, really, because at the time, I've sat down with my mum just when I've got something to tell you. And she just looked at me.
I bet she thought you'd got a girl pregnant.
That's how? How do you know that? That's literally
because I'm a mum. And if I had a son and 27, he came to me and said, I've got something to tell you, I'd be there, oh my God, I'm a nan.
I looked at her and she said, please don't tell me she's pregnant. And I went, no. I was like, if that conversation was going to happen, I'd like to think that would be a happy moment and I'd do it together. It wouldn't be, oh, by the way. And then I told her and she was like, all right. And then that was sort of it, sort of thing. She had they both had questions later on, but it sort of just got accepted, sort of thing.
So what would your advice be to a boy around that age who's decided to take steroids and he's doing it quite safely? He's got a coach, he's in a good position with it, but he wants to be open with his parents or somebody, loved one. Would you encourage to talk about it?
Yes, but I would approach it with the same thought process that I was talking about earlier. Use that exact situation. If you're 25, you're living at home and you live under your mum and dad's roof, who realistically set the rules, even though you are a grown man, you are in someone else's house. You have to go into that conversation being prepared for both outcomes. The best case scenario is they go, all right, I trust what you're doing. Be careful with your needles or whatever, just be safe. But then the other outcome is flip and go, get out of my house. I don't want that in my house or whatever. So if you're not prepared for the latter, in regards to the point where your mum, not disowning you, but saying she don't want nothing to do with it and kicks you out, are you in a position to be able to live? So
maybe
I would
it
go
goes
into
back
that.
further, think about those things before you actually start steroids?
Yeah, maybe. But some people probably won't even get that far.
No.
Some people will just be like, I want to do steroids. And then that's as far as it goes. Whereas that's my thought process, is that if I start doing this, what is the domino effect potentially that could happen from this? And what precautions are you going to take to make sure that either happens or it doesn't happen? So back to that same question, is that if I was that boy, I'd be prepared that they were going to kick me out to the point where I could live somewhere. I'd make sure I had enough money to be able to live on my own. But then if you've already got the money to live on your own, just live on your own.
Trust, I think, then was something you've been really fortunate with your family.
Yeah, all day long.
So talk to us about the relationship with your dad.
I've been very fortunate that I've worked with my dad since I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in the classic work experience, back at school when you had to do work experience, you could either work somewhere, whether that's, I don't know, they give you a book, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And just said, pick someone from here, you're going to work there for 2 weeks. I didn't want to do any of them. So I spoke to my dad and he was like, leave it with me. I'll see if you can come work with me for 2 weeks. Good decision and bad decision at the same time, because I used to going to school at 8:30, finishing at 2:30, which is lovely. And then when I went to work with my dad, I basically got put in the office because I was 15. You weren't allowed on site.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a pipe fitter welder. He used to work on building sites, all that sort of stuff. But because I wasn't allowed on site with him, I basically got put in the office. So my dad had to drop me at the office before he went to site, but he had to be on site for 7:30. And he had to drop me at Southampton. We lived in Portsmouth, which is, half hour, 45-minute drive. He had to drop me at the office and then allow him enough time to get to the site for 7:30. And at that time, he was working in Farnham, I think. So that's another half hour from Southampton, maybe more.
So you went from a school day to
So I went from getting up at 7:30 to 6 o'clock. I used to sleep in the van, and then I'd get there, he'd drop me off, I'd do my bit for the day, and then he'd pick me up at...
So you weren't working with him at all?
No, because I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to the office at 7 o'clock, and then he'd pick me up at 5:30. So it's so much longer day than what I was used to. I'd sleep in the van all the way home, and I was just absolutely battered for the whole week of just the change of getting up whenever I did.
So then you left school and started working with him?
So then I left school, and then I didn't want to go to college or anything like that because nothing really appealed to me. So then I applied to get an apprenticeship with the firm my dad worked for, doing the same trade, pipe fitter welder. Went for the interview, all that sort of stuff. Went fine. Got offered the apprenticeship, so obviously I took it. And then from the age of 16, I've been, as I say, 14, but from 16, I've been working with my dad ever since.
So you've always been in a very male-dominant working environment.
And I think that's definitely contributed to how I think.
So I know we've had conversations before about, the classic being an apprentice, what you go through, the standard. It is bullying. It's
nowadays, it's nowhere near what it was like 10, 15 years ago. When I was an apprentice, I won't go into some of the stuff because it's probably not right, but I used to
just... This is an Upfront podcast, you can tell us.
Well, I used to get beat up and abused. If I did not beat up to the point where I'd have a black eye, but I'd just get shoved about and digged or whatever, just so I knew my place and what I did wrong. So if I'd done something wrong, whatever it may be, I knew about it. Or if I'd done something I shouldn't, I'd get an earful the following day. And nowadays, people make out that's bullying. But
so be honest.
To me, it was just another day.
Be honest. Did that used to upset you?
I don't think it upset me. The first couple of times it probably did. But then I quickly realised that this is how it is. And you just got to get on with it.
Right, if you had a son and he's in this position, he's an apprentice at 15, 16, out of school, and he's working with a load of 30-year-old up blokes, and they are pushing him about because he's done something wrong, and he's come to you and he said, Dad, they're literally punching me and stuff like that, and he's coming home crying. How are you handling that?
That would be hard.
Why?
Because I'd look at it from both ways.
Like your mum?
Yeah. But because it's my boy, I'd probably take it the way that my dad approached it as well. My dad wouldn't say anything to me in regards to the classic apprentice jokes that still go on to this day and all that sort of stuff. He could have warned me all about that. But if he did, then I wouldn't have learned about it, because I don't care what anyone says. If you get pre-warned, you don't learn. You just I got away with that. But if you get embarrassed by something, it sticks with you forever. In regards to, if you make a mistake and you get called out for it, you won't ever do it again.
What I'm trying to get at is, do you think Do you think it's acceptable to do that in a work environment to young men?
The right answer is no, but I think it's very good for, not very good, but it teaches you how to deal with a lot of things in life, I think.
You're going to meet heads no matter what walk of life you go through.
But the thing I learned from it is when I was an apprentice and I was getting 9 times out of 10, my apprenticeship was fine because I learned very quickly. If I up, I'd never again, but then I'd always learn and I'd get to a point where I wouldn't do it anymore, which is the whole point. But later on, I realised when I was fully qualified and I had an apprentice, I would have treated my apprentice the same way that I got treated because I feel like they would learn better from that, whether that's right or wrong. But I look at it that the person I was an apprentice for, he was an apprentice at some point, and someone would have treated him like he treated me.
I just think it's difficult because with people that, men in society now and men your age plus who have grown up in that, or like my dad, for example, grown up getting beaten, like dads would beat their sons, workplace would be like school, you would get actual beatings by the head teacher at our parents' ages at school. Whether that plays such a role in a crippling older man, because a lot of older men now are going through that, like, don't know how to handle their mental health and changes and things like that. Does growing up like that contribute to this mindset that men probably have, and you probably do have a bit of it because of what you went through as an apprentice, like having to almost be as manly as possible.
Get on with it.
Just get on with it. But actually, like, it's all right to feel about it, or it's okay to be upset about someone treating you like work.
Yeah, all day long. But I always flip that in regards to if you've got a job that needs to get done, your emotions don't really come into it. Realistically, I think. If you turn up on site one day and you've got to do something, no matter how you feel about it, whether you feel like a bad.
See, I don't think that just applies to men though there, because as a woman, I have to do that most days.
Yeah, I think
a lot of people.
I think that applies to most people. But that's the way I would approach most things. If I know I've got to get something done, no matter what's going on in the other part of my life, that still has to get done. So it's not never going to not get done just because I've had or I've woke up on the wrong side of bed or I've had a ruck with someone. If that still needs to get done, it's got to get done.
You can very easily turn your emotions off and push them to side to carry on with your...
And I think that probably come from my apprenticeship, where I could have very well taken everything personally when I was getting abused for or whatever. But they weren't being personal. They were just saying it because I've not ruined, but I've prolonged the job we were doing because I fucked up. So they're trying to make me better by it, but it's just the way it gets done.
I think it's that whole like product of your environment. That's the way that those boys were raised in a workplace. And you even just said earlier on, if you had an apprentice now, you might treat them that way, sort of thing. Right, we have got so many questions to go through, so this is defo going to go to a part 2. Now we've got to know you, we know what you're about. We're going to dig a little deeper.
Great.
Join us for part 2. We've got a lot to ask Jack, and we will dig a lot deeper into mental health, men's mental health. We've got things about more talk about steroids, the effects of steroids on mental health. I won't give too much away, but join us for part 2.